The political landscape of Washington, D.C. was fundamentally altered this week. On Monday, August 11, 2025, President Donald Trump announced an unprecedented decision, a federal takeover of the city's Metropolitan Police Department. Citing a need to restore law and order, his administration also activated the D.C. National Guard to patrol the streets. This move places the city's law enforcement directly under presidential command, which is, honestly, a stark departure from its long-standing tradition of local governance. For the people living and working in the district, the sight of troops on presence patrols near landmarks like the Washington Monument has become an immediate and striking reality, signaling a new chapter in the complex relationship between the federal government and the city it calls home. The announcement was made with key members of President Trump's cabinet by his side, including Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel, projecting a unified front. The administration's stated reason for this dramatic intervention is what they describe as unchecked violent crime plaguing the Capitol. They pointed to specific high-profile incidents to underscore their point, most notably a recent attempted carjacking where a former government staffer was violently assaulted. This narrative of a city in crisis was presented as the primary driver for invoking federal authority. The message was clear. The local leadership had failed, and now the federal government was stepping in to enforce safety and order. In practical terms, the federal intervention has been swift and visible. An initial surge on Monday night saw a massive deployment of 850 officers and federal agents, leading to 23 arrests and the seizure of several illegal firearms. The plan involves Media Group, DC National Guard troops in action, National Guard deployment at its stock at it distribute _equally, activating up to 800 DC National Guard troops, adding as many as 450 federal law enforcement officers to the city's streets. Around 130 FBI agents are now patrolling alongside MPD officers. The Drug Enforcement Administration's head, Terry Cole, has been appointed as the interim federal commissioner of the police force. This is not a subtle change. It is a full-scale federal operation aimed at asserting control over the city's security apparatus. For many Americans, especially those unfamiliar with the unique political status of Washington, D.C., this action raises a lot of questions. Unlike the 50 states, the District of Columbia exists in a kind of political limbo, with its autonomy granted and overseen by Congress. Its residents do not have the same voting representation as states, and its local government is subject to federal oversight in ways that a state government is not. This federal takeover brings that unique and often contentious relationship into sharp focus. It represents a direct exercise of federal power over a local jurisdiction, a move that has immediately ignited a fierce debate about governance, rights, and political motivations. The legal foundation for President Trump's action rests on a specific clause within the D.C. Home Rule Act of 1973. This law, which granted the district a degree of self-governance, contains a provision, Section 740, that allows the president to assume control over the city's police force in an emergency. However, this power is not unlimited. The initial takeover is legally capped at 48 hours. To extend this period, the president must formally notify Congress. Any extension beyond 30 days would require an explicit act of Congress, setting the stage for a potential legislative battle over the long-term control of the city's police. Another critical legal distinction involves the D.C. National Guard. While state governors typically command their state's National Guard units, the D.C. National Guard is unique. It answers directly to the President of the United States. This structure gives the White House a direct line of command to deploy troops within the Capitol without needing the consent of local officials. D.C. leaders, including Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, have long fought to change this law to give the city control over its own guard, but such efforts have consistently failed to pass in Congress, leaving this presidential authority intact and ready to be used. The White House has been forceful in its justification, painting a picture of a city descending into chaos. Officials have repeatedly used the word lawless to describe the situation in D.C. To support this claim, they have highlighted alarming anecdotes of crime that have captured media attention. The narrative is that the local government, led by Mayor Muriel Bowser, has lost control, forcing the federal government's hand to protect residents and the seat of American democracy. This argument is designed to appeal to a sense of urgency and a desire for safety, framing the federal intervention not as a power grab, but as a necessary rescue mission. However, this justification is being challenged by local leaders and data. Mayor Bowser, who stated she was not given any advance notice of the takeover, has publicly pushed back against the White House's depiction of her city. She and other critics argue that the move is less about public safety and more about political theater. They contend that the administration is using isolated incidents to create a misleading narrative that serves a political agenda. This sets up a direct conflict. One side claims it is acting out of necessity to quell a crime wave, while the other insists it is a politically motivated overreach based on a false premise. The reaction to the federal takeover has been swift and deeply polarized, reflecting the nation's broader political divisions. On one side, there is strong support for President Trump's decision. The D.C. Police Union, for instance, welcomed the move, pointing to significant staffing shortages with over 800 officer vacancies. The union argues that the city's criminal justice system is broken and that federal intervention is needed to provide the resources and support that officers on the ground are lacking. Similarly, key Republicans in Congress, like House Oversight Chair James Comer, have praised the action as a necessary step to restore order and have already scheduled hearings to question D.C. officials. On the other side, the condemnation has been equally fierce. D.C. quote, S. Attorney General Brian Schwab labeled the takeover unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful. Mayor Bowser called the action unsettling, and other Democratic leaders across the country, including the Democratic Mayors Association, have denounced it as a dangerous political stunt. These critics argue that the move undermines D.C. quote, S. home rule and sets a troubling precedent for federal interference in local affairs. They see it not as a genuine effort to improve safety, but as a calculated political play designed to project strength and rally a political base. Adding another layer of complexity to this debate are the official crime statistics. According to the Metropolitan Police Department's own data, the White House's claim of a lawless city is questionable. In fact, overall crime in D.C. is reportedly lower in 2025 than it was in 2024, and violent crime is said to be at a 30-year low. Furthermore, a poll conducted earlier this year found that only 21% of D.C. residents considered crime the city's biggest problem, a significant drop from 36% in 2022. This data directly contradicts the dire picture painted by the administration, suggesting a disconnect between the stated justification for the takeover and the reality on the ground. The people of Washington, D.C. are now caught in the middle of this political firestorm. The sudden appearance of National Guard troops and federal agents has created an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty. In response, protests have begun to materialize, with some organizers reporting a significant increase in requests for paid demonstrators to oppose the federal presence. These demonstrations are focused on defending D.C. quote, S. autonomy, and raising alarms about what they see as federal overreach. The city has become the epicenter of a national debate, with its own residents navigating the daily reality of a police force no longer under the control of their elected leaders. While Washington, D.C. is at the center of this storm, it is not the only place where intense political battles are testing the boundaries of law and democracy. In Texas, another high-stakes conflict is unfolding. There, the Republican-led state Senate has passed a new congressional map that would significantly favor their party in the 2026 midterm elections, potentially giving them 5 additional seats in the U.S. House. This process, known as redistricting, is a common and often contentious part of American politics. But the response from Texas Democrats has been extraordinary and has brought the state legislature to a standstill. To prevent the Texas House from having the necessary number of members to vote on the bill, a condition known as a quorum, a group of Democratic lawmakers has fled the state. This dramatic tactic effectively paralyzes the legislative process, blocking the bill's passage for now. However, their actions have been met with intense pressure and reportedly serious threats. Some of the Democrats involved have reported receiving bomb threats and being targeted by FBI impersonators, escalating the standoff into a matter of personal safety. The Texas House is set to try again to regain a quorum, but if it fails, the governor has vowed to call another special session, ensuring the fight will continue. The Texas situation, much like the D.C. takeover, presents a clash of competing principles. On one side, Republicans argue they are legitimately using their majority power to pass legislation they believe is fair, and that the Democrats are subverting the democratic process by refusing to participate. They see the Democrats' departure as an abdication of their duty to govern. On the other side, the Democrats argue they are using one of the few tools available to them to fight back against what they see as an unfair, partisan gerrymander that would disenfranchise voters. They frame their actions as a last stand for democracy itself. These events in Washington, D.C. and Texas force us to confront fundamental questions about our system of government. When does the pursuit of safety justify overriding local control? What are the legitimate tools of political opposition when one party feels the rules are being unfairly manipulated? Is it acceptable for lawmakers to break quorum to block a bill they believe is fundamentally unjust? These are not easy questions, and they challenge us to think deeply about the delicate balance between maintaining order, respecting established laws, and protecting the democratic principles that are supposed to guide us all.